So if you're anything like me, watching sports is an enjoyable activity one can lie down, eat potato chips, hang out with the boys, and just sponge in everything sports related. In my case, professional football is the primary consumer of my television time. Throughout the NFL season, standings, playoffs dominate the headlines, and while this is enjoyable for the majority of fans, 62.5% of the rest of the league do not participate in the postseason, meaning the vast majority of fans are fans of teams not in the playoff hunt. These fans are looking forward to one thing, the offseason. The offseason resembles change, a time period where players join and or depart, a time where coaches and these players' jobs are reevaluated. And as fans of a time of deprivation of not only success but of football in general, there's two events fans always circle on the calendar: free agency and the draft. Free agency is the period where an unrestricted free agent is eligible to sign with any club or franchise. And the thing about free agency is, signing players from the free agent batch isn't necessarily a path to success in the NFL. You have to take account of the salary cap and not exceeding it, and free agency is sure expensive. But more importantly, in terms of success in the NFL, the draft is far superior. The draft is an annual meeting where future NFL talent is cherry-picked into the awaiting hands of NFL clubs. Contrary to free agency, the draft contains younger and more affordable players, hence why these picks are touted as the head of franchises. You build around these players. Given the future implications of the draft, the NFL gives off the impression that the NFL draft is a much-watched spectacle, and in my opinion, it really is. But don't just take my opinion for it. During the 2016 draft, peak viewers reached an absurd 8.3 million, only bested by the Big Bang Theory. The grandness and general anticipation of the NFL draft is frankly unrivaled by any other sports draft. This is partially because the draft is an exciting event, and fans as myself educate ourselves into prospect stats, read mock drafts, and watch the NFL Combine, a televised athletic gauntlet used to determine the athletic prowess of prospects themselves. And for the prospects themselves, these young, mostly college kids, being drafted is a dream come true. As for these kids, these teams will provide them a job and a sense of purpose in their lives. It's actually a really good deal. So with this knowledge, I will show you how the front office moves, such as free agency and the draft, can lead to success in the NFL, using my example, the 2017 world champion Philadelphia Eagles. Philadelphia fans have been deprived of football success for a very long time. Being one of the few teams without a Super Bowl win, Eagle fans were not gun-shy by letting their disdain be heard. So during the 2017 season, Philadelphia's legacy of failure was finally dissolved, and the organization and city reached a new zenith of success, and the people of Philly went nuts. Let's see how we got here. Our story begins in 2012. Coming off of an 8-9 record, seasoned head coach Andy Reid was officially on the hot seat. Andy Reid has been the Eagles' head coach since 1999, and although the team saw lots of success under him, he could never finish the deal and bring a Lombardi trophy to Philly. But what he did bring to Philly was good talent via draft and free agency, and in 2012 he brought players such as third-round pick quarterback Nick Foles and trade up in the draft of the Seahawks to take defensive tackle Fletcher Cox 12th overall. Remember these names, because they are important later on. However, in a season with starters such as a regressing and old Mike Vick and star running back LaShawn McCoy, the free agent class and draft class couldn't save the Eagles from going a measly 4-12, suffering their worst season since 1988. After the season, head coach Andy Reid was fired, and CEO Jeffrey Lurie and GM Howie Roseman looked to hire coveted Oregon head coach Chip Kelly. Coming off of a 4-12 season, the Eagles had great draft position. Given teams with poor records the year prior gifted higher draft position to improve their respective clubs, the Eagles landed the 4th overall pick. The Eagles drafted tackle Lane Johnson with their first pick and tight end Zach Ertz in the 2nd round. This season was noted for a LaShawn McCoy rushing title and NFL passing rate leader and Pro Bowl for quarterback Nick Foles, and most importantly, a playoff berth. But after a 10-6 record, unfortunately they were bounced by the Saints in the wild card. This season, Nick Foles played lights out, throwing an impressive 27 touchdowns to only 2 interceptions. Foles also threw 7 touchdowns against the Oakland Raiders. This tied an NFL record for most touchdowns in a single game. This season would mark him being named the starter for quarterback next season. With a 10-6 record, the Eagles lacked the great draft position they had in 2013. In an underwhelming draft class marked by late gems such as D-tackle Bo Allen and tight end Trey Burton, instead the Eagles looked to make a splash in free agency, signing safety Malcolm Jenkins to a 3-year, $15 million contract. And while last season Nick Foles impressed, in the 2014 season he was anything but impressive. Nick Foles finished the season with over 2,000 yards in 8 games and a 13-10 TD to interception ratio. Turnovers and durability issues plagued him all that season, and for most fans, the 2014 season was a disappointment. Despite a 10-6 record, they did not qualify for the playoffs, and first-round pick defensive end Marcus Smith, a 6th-year project pick, did not record a single sack all season. The Eagles would decline his 5th-year option in 2017, and he is already out of the league. But this just shows that not all draft picks are hits. The next part of the story is what I call the Chip Kelly paradox. Paradox because at the time, Eagles fans were reacting so negatively to his front office moves, his trades, his signings, so forth, and for good reason. His decisions were frankly absurd, but they might have helped the Eagles in their first Super Bowl win. And one thing you need to know about the Chip Kelly era is that when he was hired, he was given complete control of the personnel decisions, which is normally bad, but Chip Kelly totally abused his power, cutting key players such as offensive guard Evan Mathis and defensive end Trent Cole, and letting wide receiver Jeremy Maclin walk in free agency, leaving his QB with no viable options to pass to. And even worse, in Kelly's sacrificial hunt for quote-unquote his guides were his trades and free agent signings. He signed players such as running back DeMarco Murray and Brian Maxwell. And although they are good players, neither fit the Eagles' offensive and defensive systems, not to mention both of their 5+ year lucrative contracts. He signed quarterback Tim Tebow, and while he was cut before the season even started, the media attention that he garnered to the team was unneeded to say the least. On March 3rd, Chip Kelly dropped a bombshell in the NFL, and agreed to send LaShawn McCoy to the Buffalo Bills in turn for linebacker Kiko Alonso. This trade was obviously seen as a steal for the Bills, and Eagles fans did not approve of Chip Kelly's actions. On March 10th, Chip Kelly's Eagles and the St. Louis Rams performed a quarterback swap. Eagles acquiring 2010 first overall pick and disappointment Sam Bradford, and Rams, they got Nick Foles. Draft compensation was also included in this deal. This might seem like the end of the Nick Foles saga in Philly, but don't count him out yet. In other offseason news, Chip Kelly extended defensive end Brandon Graham to a 4-year, $26 million deal, a move that would go unnoticed in the mass headlines of trades and ESPN analysts questioning Kelly's sanity. The draft in the offseason wasn't bad either. Talent such as Jordan Hicks and Nelson Aguilar would prove to be key later on. Given Kelly's high-end personnel moves, there was still a sense of optimism in the air in Philly. The new-look Eagles would give the fans hope. However, this hope would quickly turn into disappointment as the Eagles finished the 2015 season with a measly 7-9 record and didn't qualify for the playoffs in the second year in a row. Trade acquisition and Sam Bradford underwhelmed, and lucrative free agent signings Brian Maxwell and DeMarco Murray were huge disappointments. The club looked to move on from them after the 2015 season to save the cap space, which they so carelessly threw money in their contracts. After a Week 16 loss, Chip Kelly was promptly fired, letting Eagles fans around the world take a breath of fresh air, while also the destruction that he had caused to their roster looked like it would linger. The 2016 season would prove to be very interesting. With lots of assets from the Chip Kelly regime, Eagles management and new head coach hire Doug Pearson had lots of trade bait to work with. They also looked to make a splash in the draft for a new quarterback to fix their woes at the position, which hasn't been good since Andy Reid. Despite the search for a new QB, they extended quarterback Sam Bradford to a 2-year, $36 million deal. They also inked guard Brandon Brooks to protect their future QB and to compensate for Chip Kelly's decision to let Evan Mathis walk the year prior. On March 9th of 2016, Eagles front office seemed to be very busy pulling off 2 huge trades. One, traded DeMarco Murray and a 4th-round pick to the Tennessee Titans for their 4th-round pick. Underwhelming, yet necessary. 2, trading Brian Maxwell, Kiko Alonso, and the 13th overall pick to the Dolphins for their 1st-round pick. The 8th overall pick, a ballsy move that will prove to be instrumental in an act to get off the board and take a quarterback. Eagles would then use that 8th overall pick as ammo to get to the very top of the board, and on April 20th of 2016, the Eagles pulled off a trade that would give them the 2nd overall pick in a trade with the Cleveland Browns. The Browns received the 8th overall pick and the Eagles' 2016 3rd and 4th round picks, their 2017 1st round pick, and their 2018 2nd round pick. And with that 2nd overall pick, the Eagles would go on to select quarterback Carson Wentz, a prospect out of North Dakota State University, to be their quarterback of the future. And while they gave up a lot to get him, every single Eagles fans would say it was worth it. Another masterful act of trading on the Eagles side. After that trade, the Eagles would trade Sam Bradford to the Vikings for a 2017 first-round pick, a fleecing and robbery of a desperate team given their starting quarterback QB Teddy Bridgewater had torn his ACL in off-season practice after the draft. With Bradford out of the picture, Carson Wentz was named the starter for the 2016 season, and in Week 1 against the Cleveland Browns, oddly enough the team that they traded with to get him, Carson Wentz threw for 190 yards and 2 touchdowns, and was named NFL Pepsi Rookie of the Week. Carson Wentz had an expected sloppy rookie season, throwing for 16 touchdowns to 14 picks. The Eagles finished 7-9 and missed the playoffs for the third year in a row. However, despite a mediocre record, it was obvious that the Eagles were a team on the rise. Promising young core led by a young quarterback Carson Wentz at the helm, and a defense led by Fletcher Cox, Jordan Hicks, and Malcolm Jenkins. Previous draft picks and free agent signings were panning out for them beautifully, and they looked to make a big jump in year 2 with Doug Peterson at head coach and Carson Wentz at quarterback. The Eagles started off the offseason with big moves during free agency to support a young quarterback. They signed notable receivers Torrey Smith and Alshon Jeffrey to support a passing attack highlighted by players Zach Ertz and Nelson Aguilar, both of which were drafted in years prior. They also signed kicker Jake Elliott and perennial jackhammer and touchdown machine LeGarrette Blount, and also Chance Warmack to help protect Carson Wentz from opposing pass rushers. Notably, however, was quarterback Nick Foles. Yeah, remember him? The guy that started for the Eagles for the year 2014? Well, Doug Peterson and co signed him to a 2-year, $11 million deal after a short stint in Kansas City with head coach Andy Reid, the player who drafted him. But that's not important. Nick Foles is back in town. Although familiar faces are nice to have back for this nostalgia factor, management saw Carson Wentz as a superior quarterback, which he really was, as Nick Foles was signed to be a backup and mentor for Carson Wentz. Draft, the Eagles selected defensive end Derek Barnett with a pick they got from the Minnesota Vikings via the Sam Bradford trade. The Eagles also traded their third-round pick to the Baltimore Ravens for defensive tackle Timmy Jernigan to bolster an already league-best pass rush. A win for the Eagles. The Eagles kept winning trades when they sent Jordan Matthews, a second-round pick from the Chip Kelly era, and their 2018 third-round pick to the Buffalo Bills with cornerback Ronald Darby. These moves heavily improved an Eagles defense that was already stacked. The Eagles were primed for a Super Bowl run, and despite being ignored by the national media, ESPN gave them 61 odds to win the Super Bowl. The odds being stacked against them, the Eagles opened the NFL season on good terms, beating the Washington Redskins, in which Fletcher Cox secured the win by hopping on a loose turnover, giving the ball back to the offense, preventing the Redskins to score. This win was instantly juxtaposed by a loss at Kansas City against, guess who, their former coach Andy Reid, who beat them for the second year in a row. This would be the first of only 3 losses. In the midst of the winning streak, the NFL club continued to show excellence in the front office aspect of the game, trading a 2018 4th-round pick to the Miami Dolphins for Pro Bowl running back Jay Ajayi. Ajayi would make his debut in Week 9 against the Denver Broncos, in a game where the Eagles scored 51 points, the most all season for them. Carson Wentz had a great game, throwing for 208 yards and 4 touchdowns. Jay Ajayi and Alshon Jeffrey went off too, contributing 3 touchdowns to the shellacking of the Broncos. The Eagles would go on to continue to win out until Week 13, where they were handled a loss by the Seattle Seahawks. The Eagles played sloppy, and despite a 141-yard and 1 touchdown effort by Nelson Aguilar, the Eagles still couldn't pull out the W. However, the biggest blow to the Eagles in 2017 wouldn't come in form of a loss. For the very next week against the Los Angeles Rams, Carson Wentz would experience an apparent leg injury while diving for a touchdown in the late third quarter. Nick Foles was put in the game for the injured Wentz, and the Eagles escaped LA with the win, but not at a great price, for the second-year pro and presumed MVP Carson Wentz had torn his ACL. After the injury, Pearson noted his team's resiliency and stressed that the Eagles fans should not lose faith. He also said that the Eagles signed Nick Foles in the past season for situations like this. For Eagles fans, this was a nightmare scenario. One does not just lose an MVP caliber player and expect him to still make a Super Bowl push. Once Doug Pearson proclaimed Nick Foles the starter, Vegas lengthened Philly's odds to win the Super Bowl from 6-1 to 12-1. The steam the Eagles built seemed to have disappeared. Analysts counted them out. Nobody thought the Eagles were going to win it all. Everything that they seemed to build up was all destroyed. The very next game, Nick Foles would throw for 4 touchdowns and a W against divisional opponent Giants. They would also claim a first-round bye in this game. Entering the playoffs with Nick Foles in a 13-3 record, many fans and sports writers were questioning how Eagles would perform in the playoffs, setting the stage for their underdog run. In the divisional round against the Atlanta Falcons, the Eagles were projected to lose. This would be the first time a number 1 seed would be projected to lose in the divisional round. Following a theme in the season, the Eagles would rely on a relentless defense, highlighted by pass rushers Brandon Graham and Timmy Jernigan. The Eagles would only surrender 10 points to the Falcons, and the Eagles would go on to win. The Eagles were once again underdogs in the championship game, this time the second-seeded Vikings. The Eagles would make quick work of them, though, routing them with 38 unanswered points. Ironically, Derek Barnett secured the game-winning forced fumble. The pick that Ely used to draft Barnett was Minnesota's, and it seemed to go back to haunt them. Final score, 38-7, and one Super Bowl berth. The Eagles had one more obstacle between them and a shiny, sweet Lombardi trophy from which they've been so deprived of. Longing for a win, the Eagles were looking for a chance to make history. However, this obstacle will not be easy for them. The Eagles will have to overcome the defending Super Bowl champion Patriots, a dynasty led by quarterback Tom Brady and head coach Bill Belichick, the best at their positions. And Philly, coming in the Super Bowl with Nick Foles, against Tom Brady, the best quarterback of all time, the same quarterback that defeated them and left them empty-handed in Super Bowl 39, the stage was set. Philadelphia took first blood on a Jake Elliott three-point field goal. Scores from LeGarrette Blount, Alshon Jeffrey, and a trick play in which Trey Burton found Nick Foles in the end zone for a score helped it make 22-12 halftime. In the third quarter, the Patriots looked to squander Philly's lead, as Brady found Gronk for the score to make it 22-19. However, Philly wasn't going to let up now. Foles found running back Corey Clement on a 22-yard score to extend the lead. Later in the fourth quarter, the Pats would finally take the lead when Brady found Gronk once more to make it 32-33. The Eagles would respond with a masterful 14-play, 75-yard and score, Ertz being the recipient of another Foles touchdown pass. This would make the score 38-32. On the Patriots' next drive, with 2 minutes left in the game, Brandon Graham sacked Tom Brady of the ball, and Derek Barnett recovered the fumble. Giving the ball back to the offense, the Eagles looked to score. And with another Jake Elliott field goal, they did. With seconds left, Brady lobbed a prayer in the end zone for Gronk. It felt incomplete, blanketed by players Malcolm Jenkins and Ronald Darby. The giant had fallen. The Patriots dynasty didn't get their way this time, for the Eagles did it. They won 41-33. Nick Foles had an amazing performance, 373 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception is nothing to scoff at, and Foles was named Super Bowl MVP. This marked the second time a backup won Super Bowl MVP, first being quarterback, you guessed it, This is Tom why Brady. I call this a true Cinderella story. The Eagles had to fight through adversity through their entire championship run. I just decided to tell the story, putting an emphasis on how the front office handled it. The business side of things. It's just a hidden gem of NFL football. Football isn't all about hard hits and explosive plays. There's a business element to it too, and it's actually really entertaining. And that's why certain fans circle these events, the draft and free agency period, on their calendars, as those decisions that club makes really determines their success. That is why after giving the green light to the Carson Wentz trade, the Browns went 0-16 the next season. They didn't draft and sign the right players. Given the right cap out they didn't sign anybody. They no one that they had was like good. Deshaun Kaiser, bust. Corey Coleman, bust. Most of the players that they got from that trade isn't on the team still. They're not on the team. While on the Eagles, on the other hand, they drafted and signed players with such an impressive tendency, it created the Super Bowl run. And that's why the front office is so important and an untold story of